You think we can make it through tonight? Not happening. Not at the rate that we've been going with this here. So, we are going to pick up this evening, not in the book of Acts, and I'll blow this up here in just a second, but we're going to go over to Luke and chapter 8. Luke chapter 8. We didn't quite finish with the account of Legion and Jesus casting the demons into the herd of swine. So going to verse 26, there was one thing I did want to cover with this before we moved on, and we didn't have time to last week. And that's the Gerasenes. The country of the Gerasenes. Then they sailed to the country of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee. So they've crossed over to the other side. When Jesus stepped out on land, there met him a man from the city who had demons. For a long time he had worn no clothes, and he had not lived in a house, but among the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him and said with a loud voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, the Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For many a time it seized him. He was kept under guard, bound with chains and shackles, but he would break the bonds and be driven by the demon into the desert. Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He said, "Legion," for many demons had entered him. When they begged him not to command them to depart into the abyss. Now a large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him to let him enter these. So he gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and drowned. When the herdsmen saw what had happened, they fled and told it in the city and in the country. Then the people went out to see what had happened. They came to Jesus and found the man with whom from whom the demons had gone, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it told them how the demon-possessed man had been healed. And all the people of the surrounding country of the Gerasenes asked him to depart from them, for they were seized with great fear. So he got into the boat and returned. Go ahead and hold off right there. Let's go back to Mark chapter 5. In Mark chapter 5, 1 through 20 is really the account. But we see here again that this is found in the country of the Gerasenes in verse 1. So we know Luke has kind of compiled his gospel per se off of the other gospels. He's taken all things into account, and he gives a record of that to Theophilus. So here in Mark, we find the Gerasenes, and Luke copies that. Luke uses the country of the Gerasenes. But if we go over to Matthew chapter 8, in Matthew chapter 8 and verse 28, he came to the other side, to the country of the Gadarenes. And if we look on a map, which we'll do here in just a moment, we find that in the country of the Gadarenes, that there are miles in between these two places. This is quite a large territory that we're talking about here. You can see up there where it says the drowning of the pigs in Gadara, but then down through we have the Gerasene region. And if we come back over here, sorry about that. We come back over here. Down in the bottom corner down over here is where Gerasa is, the Gerasenes. So what is the account? What are we looking at with this here? Many different sources I could have chose to go to, but I wanted to read the entry out of the Smith's Bible Dictionary. This gets a little bit tedious, but I'll explain it when we get down to the end of it. So the Smith's Bible Dictionary says this about it. These three names are used indiscriminately to designate the place where Jesus healed two demoniacs. Remember in Matthew, there were two of them, not just one man. The first two are in the Authorized Version, which is the American Standard Version of 1901. Mark 8:28, Mark 5:1, and Luke 8:26. In Gerasenes, in place of the Gadarenes, the miracle referred to took place, without doubt, near the town of Gergesa, the modern Cursa, close by the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee, hence in the country of the Gergesenes. But as Gergesa was a small village and little known, the evangelist who wrote for more distant readers spoke of the event as taking place in the country of the Gadarenes, so named from its largest city, Gadara. And this country included the country of the Gergesenes, as a state includes a country. The Gergesenes were the people of the district of which Gerasa was the capital. This city was better known than Gadara or Gergesa. Indeed, in the Roman age, no city of Palestine was better known. It became one of the proudest cities of Syria. It was situated some 30 miles southeast of Gadara on the borders of Perea and a little north of the river Jabbok. It is now called Jerash and is a deserted ruin. The district of the Gerasenes is probably included that of the Gadarenes, so that the demoniac of Gergesa belonged to the country of the Gadarenes and also to that of the Gerasenes, as the same person may, with equal truth, be said to live in the city or state in the United States. That kind of clears it up a little bit for us, but for those nearby, the local name would be used, but in writing to distant people, as the Greeks and the Romans, the more comprehensive and general name would be given. So as we're talking to people that might be familiar with the Gadarenes, we'll use the country of the Gadarenes. But when people aren't really sure about where Gadara is, such as with Mark and Luke being written to a more non-Jewish population, we're going to use the name of a region that's a little bit more familiar. So, we might talk about Slap Out, Alabama to somebody that's around here, but then when we get somewhere else, people don't know where Slap Out is. So we talk about Montgomery, Alabama, just north of Montgomery, Alabama. Well, when I was over in Australia, where are you from? I'm from Alabama. I didn't give a city, state. You draw a line across the middle and a line right down the center and put your finger where they intersect, and that's where I'm from, in Alabama. No, that's kind of what we have going on here between Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And really, there's a lot of different things that you can look at and you'll see that are out there, but I think Smith's Bible Dictionary nails it, and that's a pretty accepted authority on as a Bible dictionary. So I feel pretty confident that if we go with that explanation of it, that we're pretty close. Brother Bobby?
And you're right. It's the same thing, and we do this every day. You've been out of the country more than I have. But when I was in Mexico a number of years ago, one of the things, because there were so many people flying into Cozumel and Cancun and other places like that and all over the world, sometimes you'd be in a restaurant and the waiter might ask you, what country are you from? I'd say United States. Then they'd say, oh, okay, where am I? Alabama. Okay? Oh, okay, what big city? Sometimes I just say Birmingham, okay?
Right.
South of Birmingham, okay? Oh, yeah, I know Alabama, Birmingham.
Right.
It's the same thing. It's a way to identify to people that are not from that region.
Right.
Just like you say, somebody, you're talking to somebody outside the perimeters of Elmore, Talbot, Montgomery, and probably Shelby County. If you say Hopeful or Slap Out, they're going to say,
Mm-hmm.
So you got to narrow it down into something that is a common basis.
Right. Yeah, and so we see this up here, this Kersey or Gergesa, all the way up at the very top of there, and it's really hard to say that, no, it is from Gadara. No, he was in Gerasa, because there's no sea there. There's there's cliffs and there's hills, as we can tell through the through that map right there. You can zoom it in, you can kind of see you can see the 3D kind of the ranges throughout there right there. But the Sea of Galilee is surrounded by steep hills. So we understand this has to be on that. So we have this little bitty town, this little bitty village up in the northeastern corner up there, Kersey today, or Gergesa back then. So you're going to find all kinds of weird things about this if you really start researching. There is a very popular theory that Jesus left the coast of, left Judea and went across the Mediterranean Sea to an Italian town and cast out a herd of swine. And there's even there's some shrines and things to him for that thing set up over there. And I mean, you'll see all kinds of different things out there. But I think that when we put all of this together, and we, especially looking at the maps and seeing this and thinking about the region, like we saw here, the Gerasene region, I think we can put it together and see that this is pretty much what we're looking at here. And it makes sense as to why we have the different accounts, because Matthew and Mark differ while Luke borrows from Mark. Matthew is really written more towards a Jewish audience. They're going to be familiar with that, whereas Mark and Luke are a broader audience, especially Luke being written to an officer in the court of, in the Roman court. I mean, we're looking at somebody who may not be familiar with this area at all, so we're going to use that broader region. I did want to kind of provide some kind of explanation before we moved out of this exorcism miracle as to why we have two different places mentioned, and then, because there's so much going on there. It is interesting that Matthew only mentions two of them, while the others only mention one, but the focus of the other is more upon the act of what Jesus has done there. And really, when we talk about just the one man whom the legion of demons were possessing, that's kind of the key focus of that. Matthew is a bit of a broader gospel. There's a lot more information in Matthew than the more compact Mark. Mark seems to be just hitting the high points of a lot of things. And in Luke, you would think that Luke, being the doctor, that he's going to present more information. But again, Luke seems to be copying some off of the others. He's compiling all of these things together there. And the most important part is the legions of demons that are being cast out. And remember, we talked about last week here, have you come to torment us before the time? Cast us into the herd of pigs. We saw in Luke's account that they said, do not cast us into the abyss. They don't want to go to the abyss. Cast us anywhere, cast us wherever, just do not send us back before our time. We want as much time as possible before we end up there. So, all right. Any other questions, comments before we move off of Legion?
I think, it's real interesting if you'll back up just a few verses, that when you look at this, and I guess first time that I really realized what was going on here, the demons recognized Jesus. They didn't have no problem knowing who he was. You know, it's just like, oh, Son of God, have you come here to torment us before our time?
Right, verse 29 there.
They recognized him. They knew his mission. They didn't make it.
Right.
Well, they should have, because it's like you said, where were they at one time? They were up there in eternity with him before they were cast out.
Right.
So, and it's really fascinating when you look at that. Not only do you have a confession of who he is, but you have an understanding of his mission.
You got a recognition of the mission.
Yeah, and yet man who had the written law at that time, and was entrusted with the written law, had a problem with both the recognition and the mission.
Right.
Okay? It's just like in Acts chapter, you probably will get there, in Acts chapter 19, when those vagabond Jews were practicing exorcism, and of course they came across this man, and the evil spirit said what in verse 15? Jesus I know. Paul I know. Who are you? Like, what do you call yourself doing? You're not Jesus. You're not Paul. You're not one of the disciples. You're not one of the apostles. What do you call yourself doing? And of course, what they done was, in a way, verse 16 is, I hate to say comical, but it is when you stop and look at it in the context. And the man in whom the evil spirit was leaped on the vagabond Jews, overcame them, and prevailed against them, so that they fled out of that house naked and wounded. Well, he ripped them up, didn't he? They don't want nobody messing with them, because they know that person.
Right.
You're gonna be messing with us. What they're concerned with, in the picture it paints here, they're concerned with people like Jesus and Paul and the disciples and the apostles and the Christians. They ain't worried about who they got. They don't want nobody who they don't have messing with us. Because they did. It's just like over there. He said, "They come to tempt us before our time."
Right.
They got work to do. They got to pull as many Christians as they can back into the abyss world. Anyway.
Right. Yeah, this idea of who are you they recognize this plan, this mission was plotted out before the foundation of the world. We find that in Ephesians chapter 1, that he had already determined, preordained, predestined before the foundation of the world that we would be gathered, that his kingdom would be gathered together, that he was coming. And so they recognize that this mission has begun, but they also recognize that this mission is not finished.
Can I reference back to that, back to Genesis 3:15? You know, it all goes back to that reading.
Right.
Everything that we are reading and studying, it all goes back to when Jesus struck out Calvary, beginning in Genesis 3:15. Every sentence in all the accounts that we've studied, and if you study in the Old Bible and the New Bible, on the devil's mission is to do what? Forward the plan of God.
Right.
You know, he inspired man to do all that stuff before the great deluge, right? Well, look what happened. Well, wasn't about 100 years after, man started to build him a tower back up to, the advise God, the Tower of Babel. And it's the same thing. All of this, with these demons and with all of this, they didn't want to go into that abyss yet because they still had work to do because their mission was to pull the Jews back.
Right.
Go back to Genesis 3:15, the whole thing.
Right.
All of it. I mean, a lot went on when man fell there in that garden that we don't think about. A whole lot.
Right. It's interesting, you think about the Greek story of Pandora's box and everything being open and everything loosed out into the world. Where did it come from? It's easy to see how some of these pagan legends can come about. Ryan, you had your hand up?
Do you think maybe they couldn't leave on their own?
Are you talking about the demons?
Yeah.
Being able to go in and out? I would think so.
I mean, because they recognize Christ, why they couldn't have left the man of their own accord. And then why they asked to be sent to be pigs.
I mean, I guess it all depends on the will, what they wanted to do. If you're going to cast us out, we'd rather do that. Don't send us out. Don't send us into the abyss or even into another place. Because, Jesus tells a story about a demon, and I'm just this supposition and what's going through my mind right now. He tells a story about the demon that is cast. He's cast out, and he just wanders. He's looking for a place to reside. So they need something, and maybe that's part of it, is that they have to be indwelling something. I don't really know, but I guess they have free will to enter into a person. I don't see why they want to have free will to come out of a person on their own. I mean, I don't know if that's what you were thinking along the, if that takes care of your question or not. Daniel?
To me, it kind of sounds like Jesus had a corner. It doesn't
Right.
matter if they could leave the person or not. Jesus is standing there.
Right.
Hey, don't throw me out.
Yeah.
You know?
But, and it's interesting that they have to obey his voice.
Yeah, he says go.
Right. When he says go, you're going. I mean, just like going back there to Acts chapter 19, the vagabond Jews, they couldn't cast them out. They had why? Because they didn't have the authority. They weren't acting on the authority of somebody who had control over those demons. So you were going to say something too, brother? There, Brother Bob?
I think the last part of that is
Right.
Okay? Their control over people back then, if I understand it correctly, was there were people literally demonic possessed, okay? It takes on the appearance that people, that demons wouldn't go into people if you look at the bigger picture, okay? And they had to be removed out of the land. I'm trying to think of the passage of scripture in the Old Testament. I think we looked at it about how the unclean spirit, when Jesus would come, before the church was established, the unclean spirit in the land would be cast out or removed. They no longer have that physical dominion over people because of Jesus and the apostles. And when Christ died on the cross and was resurrected, that limited the power of the devil. People today no longer have what we would call demons in them. Now let me qualify that before, okay? Today is a matter of choice. Okay? How do they get in?
Right.
All you gotta do is crack that door. Here they come. One demon after another.
Right.
You say, you mean multi-demon? Well, if you wanna just play it out in the world of terminology, how about the demon of drugs? How about the demon of prescriptive drugs? How about the demon of alcohol? How about the demon of gambling?
Right.
Pick something. Here they come, right? One thing kind of leads to another, right? Okay? So you invite them in. An exorcism still has to take place today, but it's through the obedience of the gospel.
Right.
That's how they're cast out. Now, if you don't stay close to the gospel and in the word and replace that emptiness with something, will they come back? Oh yeah, they came back in the Bible.
Right.
You know, a man, went there, the demons were cast out, and he was like in an empty field or whatever. And, 7 more came back 7 times worse.
Right.
So, yeah, but as far as them there, I think them at this time that Jesus is dealing with, it looks like that was done to show the power and authority that he had
Yep.
over them. It was a confrontation is what it was.
Right.
Now,
All of the miracles of Jesus, as we've said throughout this study here, Jesus doesn't do anything without a purpose.
right,
There's always some reason why Jesus does a miracle, why he performs a miracle, whether it's to confirm the word, and here, what we've talked about with these, just like Brother Bobby's saying there, is that this is showing Christ's power over the spiritual realm. We've seen his power over the physical illnesses, now he's showing his power over the spiritual illnesses. And talking about those demons coming back 7 times worse, Peter talks about that the man that goes back into sin is what? Like a dog returning to its vomit and the sow having washed to her wallowing in the mire. And the latter end is worse than the first. And it's impossible to renew them again to repentance. Now, I pulled this up. Brother Bobby made me think about this passage here in Romans chapter 8, 38 and 39. I'm sure that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor thing to come, nor power, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. No, there's nothing. In all of these things, we are more than conquerors. Can anything separate us from the love of Christ? Tribulation, distress, persecution, famine, nakedness, danger, sword. Nothing can separate us from the love of Christ.
maybe another thought on that, and as you was reading it, I was just thinking about that. Nothing can separate us but ourselves.
Right.
We can
Yes,
let
sir.
the demon come back in. We can throw salvation away, and all that's for naught.
Right.
Maybe it's like this with those demons in Jesus' time. You stop and think about it, what reason do they have to leave once they got in? It's kind of like this. It's kind of like when you watch a lot of things, people that commit crime, robbery, they are a, what do you call it, over and over again. The police can be getting closer and closer and closer, but do they quit? They don't have a reason to quit
Right.
till they get caught. And here they caught. Now they got a reason to want something different, right? Now they got a reason to flee bargain. Now they got a reason to ask for leniency, okay? But until they are cornered, and I think that come up from Daniel, what reason did they have to come out? They had it, okay? Same way that you find with people that commit, serial killers, for example. And maybe I'm going off the deep a little bit on this. Most cases of serial killers, even though the police is closing and hot on their trail, do they quit? What reason do they have to quit?
Right.
They're perfectly happy. I'm not in a coma. Why should I quit doing what I'm doing?
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
And that's just a thought maybe that looking down the line of what Ryan was talking about, about it. I mean, what reason would they have, even though Jesus is standing there, police standing right here in front of them, right? If they get a chance, guess what they're gonna do? They'll steal his bag. Or they'll try to grab his gun.
Right.
It's almost like a total act of defiance in this is what it is,
Yeah.
Knowing the whole time that if the police catch them, where they going? Well, used to jail, right? I know they get education and all that now, but I'm talking about the reality of the situation, they go to jail, right? They usually going to jail. But what reason did they have? They're going to take every last breathing breath they had to hang on to that man. Human nature is the same way.
Right.
Anyway,
So,
you got a lesson to cover, I need to shut up.
Hey, Brother Reed,
yes, sir.
I'm thinking about, see, I get this, well, I hear something, hear myself talk. I'm thinking about, Mark recording all these miracles to being as a helpmate for building faith. Because if you look at the last 3 verses of chapter 4, when God they woke him up, Jesus, when they woke him up out of the bottom of a boat, he said unto the wind and the sea, he spoke to the wind and sea and said, peace, be still. Then he asked a question in the next verse, why are you so fearful? Why are you so fearful? How is it that you don't have faith? So I figure then he records all this other stuff in chapter 5 following. It will lead up to faith, because you remember when Matthew in the 8th chapter, when there was this centurion approached Jesus about his daughter being sick at home, he said, I'm not worthy for you to come under my roof, but if you just speak the word and my daughter shall be healed. You remember that? And they said, now that's, and then later on the comment was, I haven't seen that great of faith nowhere in Israel. So you see, it has all to do with faith building. That was my point to make. That's why Mark recorded these miracles. They're all connected with the thought of building faith.
Yeah, why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? Have you not learned yet what's happening here?
Well, I
So,
pulled them glasses off and I couldn't read it, but I thought I remembered it said, have you no faith?
right. Yes, sir.
It's about as if to say, you just ain't got no faith. You
Right.
need to have some faith.
Right. Okay. Going over to Matthew chapter 9. I think we can get through this one here in just a couple minutes to finish this out. Matthew chapter 9, 32 and 33. As they were going away, behold, a demon-oppressed man who was mute was brought to him. When the demon had been cast out, the mute man spoke, and the crowds marveled, saying, never has anything like this been seen of Israel. But the Pharisees said he cast out demons by the prince of demons. So we're back to that again. Back to Beelzebub. He's casting them out by Beelzebub. So this demon, acting completely different than all the others, this is taking away his speech. And don't really understand what the difference is between all of this. Somebody has this just inhuman strength and just they're out of their mind. Others are mute and blind and can't see. I mean, some have physical impairments. Some have seizure-like symptoms. There's all kinds of different things that happen when a demon is possessed, and I just can't help but think it represents kind of like today. Sin affects people in different ways. The temptations are always different for each and every one. You know, the things that I would be faced with are different than the things that you might be faced with, and just all the way along. But no matter what's being done by the demon to the individual, the cure is still the same. No matter what's happening with each individual, none of them take anything different than Jesus saying, come out. No matter what it is, the cure for it is still the same. And the crowds marvels. Nothing like this has ever been seen in Israel. You know, have there been exorcisms? Have there been people casting out demons? I think Josephus talks a little bit about Pharisees and others performing some exorcisms. So there's something like that. But just like with anything else that Jesus does, he's standing on the mount and preaching. Well, they've heard preaching all their lives. When they go to the synagogues, there's always somebody there preaching, but not like Jesus did. Not in the way that Jesus did. Yeah, there's still people there that were casting out demons. These vagabond Jews were going about trying to cast out demons. Now, they may have just been copycats, trying to copy what the disciples and the apostles were doing, but maybe it's something that tradition carried on, whatever. But it wasn't like Jesus did it. All he had to do was say, come out. And when we get to the resurrection miracles, you know, like with Lazarus, all Jesus has to say is call him by name and come forth. You know, who on earth is able to speak and their voice carry into the depths, into the grave, to wake someone up? Or just grab the little girl by her hand and raise her up? Who on earth was able to do these things like him? So no matter what goes on, no matter what no matter what's happening with the individual due to the demonic possession, the cure for everything there is still the same. And we bring it back to today as well, and we bring it back to sin in our lives and everything. No matter what the sin is, no matter what the effect is, no matter what the consequences are, no matter the individual, it doesn't matter. The cure is still the same. It's still going to be Jesus Christ. It's still going to be the blood of Christ, and it's still going to have to be the power that Jesus uses to cast these things out. And the power that he's using is himself. He's not casting out by the prince of demons. He's casting out by his authority. You know, we're looking at a clash between two different kingdoms. We're looking at the kingdom of darkness and the kingdom of his dear son. That's straight out of Colossians chapter 1. Transferred us out of the kingdom of darkness and into the kingdom of his dear son. We're looking at two different kingdoms. Jesus' kingdom is fighting against the kingdom of Satan. They recognize who he is. They know they recognize his power. Even the demon, there with Legion that we saw. They knew what power Jesus had. And they knew that the control that Jesus had over that, to take them and to send them into something else. It's all going back to him and his authority. Brother Bobby?
So, what you're telling me is we can get relief from the demons we have today.
Right.
Through
Through Jesus Christ.
Man can offer you some sense of help. Maybe this is the thing that you were talking about with the different programs they have.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who is the cure? Who do you have to replace it with
Right.
to stay that way? The Word, right? So really it's the same thing, They were confronted by the Word. And the Word has the power to overcome no matter what the issue or disease or demonic or whatever it was, still today. problems in people's lives, they're looking in the wrong places, there's probably too many fields and talking to too many psychiatrists, okay? I had an interesting statement, made to me not long ago by a person that had a degree in psychiatric care. And he referred to a lot of it as junk science. Instead of junk science, you need God science. What's wrong with a lot of people is the conscience is bothered.
Right.
And all the pills in the world won't cure guilty conscience. Only the blood.
Right.
I think that's what we're seeing.
So, go ahead and open your hymn books to hymn number 334. 334 is the song that Adam announced earlier. We'll sing that here in just a moment. We've seen in several of these cases, especially back during the healing miracles, but here with the exorcisms as well, that people are bringing the sick, the diseased, the demonic possessed. They're bringing them to Jesus because they recognize him as as authority. They recognize him as someone who can help. They recognize him as this powerful being. Whether or not they recognize him as the Son of God, they recognize him at the very least as a prophet. They know, even the Pharisees say, we know that you are come from God. No man can do these things unless God has sent him. We know. In Matthew chapter 16, as Jesus is talking to his disciples, who do men say that I am? Some say one of the prophets. Some say this, some say that. No matter what they think he is, they recognize that he is the one with the power. That he's the one, not Pharisees, not any of the, it's Jesus Christ. He's the one. If I can just get them to him, he can help. If I can just touch just the hem of his garment, he can help. That power that Jesus has is a power that is calling. Our song, Zion's Call, sweetly rings over land and sea, bidding us. That power that he has, that authority that he has, is just as he said, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me. And so the cure for the world is to get eyes pointed to Jesus, to get ourselves pointed towards him. If we can just get that seed planted, the gospel can take effect and the gospel can take hold into a person's life. If we can just get the foot in the door and get the seed in the ground, something's going to happen. And then, of course, it has to be, it's up to the individual at that point whether or not the ground is rocky, whether it's the wayside, whether it's thorny, or whether it's good ground. But if we just get the seed in, the gospel can have extreme power to cast out even things that others, like Jesus' disciples, say, we've tried, but we couldn't cast it out. Jesus has the power to cast these things out of our lives. So if we have anything that we need to eradicate out of our lives, we have anything that needs to be brought out of us, the power of the gospel of Jesus